The courtroom air was thick with tension as I stepped through the heavy oak doors, my heels clicking against the polished floor like a countdown to judgment. There she was, Victoria Bennett, my mother, sitting at the defendant's table with her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. 8 years ago she had thrown me out into the pouring rain after catching me in Milani's arms, declaring that no lesbian would ever be her daughter. Now at 25, Chloe Bennett, was the attorney she desperately hired to save her from a lawsuit that could bankrupt her and shatter what was left of our fractured family. But as I took my seat beside her, the ghost of that night flooded back without mercy. It had started innocently enough, or so I thought. Milani Rivera, my classmate with the warm brown eyes and infectious laugh, had been my secret for months. We were both 17, navigating the pressures of senior year in our small Texas town where being different was a sin whispered in every pew and every PTA meeting. That evening after school we had snuck into my room to study, but the books lay forgotten as we shared a kiss that felt like the first real breath I had ever taken. The door burst open and there was Mom, her face twisted in horror and disgust. "Get out!" she had screamed at me while Milani was shoved aside like she was poison. "Pack your things and leave. I won't have this abomination in my house." The memory made my stomach churn even now, the same way it had when I stood on the porch in the rain with nothing but a backpack and the clothes on my back. Milani's parents had let me stay one night out of pity, but the next morning they drove me to a distant aunt in California, afraid the scandal would stain their own reputation. Those first months were hell. Working double shifts at a diner, crying myself to sleep in a tiny studio apartment, questioning if love was worth losing everything. Yet every time doubt crept in, I remembered Milani's hand in mine and the way she had whispered, "We'll find a way." I pushed through, earning scholarships, grinding through undergrad and then law school, graduating at the top of my class. Becoming a lawyer wasn't just a career. It was armor, proof that the girl they threw away could survive and thrive. "Chloe," my mother whispered now, her voice cracking as the judge entered the chamber. "Thank you for coming back. I know I don't deserve it." Her eyes, once full of fire and certainty, were hollow and pleading. I nodded curtly, not trusting myself to speak more than the bare minimum. The plaintiff, a former business partner named Mr. Harlan, was suing her for alleged fraud in the sale of the family construction company after my father's sudden death 5 years ago. Millions were at stake and the evidence, cooked books, hidden accounts, shady transfers, was damning. But she insisted she was innocent, a victim of circumstance and bad advice. I had taken the case for reasons I still couldn't fully admit to myself. Closure, revenge, or maybe the twisted hope that saving her might finally silence the voice in my head that still called me worthless. As the opening statements began, I scanned the gallery out of habit. And then I saw her. Milani, sitting 3 rows back, her dark hair longer now, her posture straight and composed. Our eyes locked across the room and the entire world tilted. 8 years of silence. 8 years of wondering what happened to the girl who once promised me forever. And here she was, watching me defend the woman who had torn us apart. My pulse hammered so loudly I almost missed the judge's first question. What was she doing here? Had she come to watch me fail? Or was something larger pulling us both back into this nightmare? The day dragged on with motions and objections, but my mind kept drifting to the past. I remembered the way Milani and I had first connected in AP English, passing notes about books that felt dangerous and alive. How we stole moments behind the bleachers, hearts racing, swearing no one would ever know. The fear had been constant. Fear of being seen, fear of my mother's weekly sermons about sin and family values. Yet in those stolen hours I had felt more myself than anywhere else. When Mom caught us, the world didn't just crack, it shattered. I left without saying goodbye to Milani properly. Too ashamed and too broken to risk dragging her down with me. Now seeing her here, I wondered if she had carried the same scars, or if she had moved on and left me behind like yesterday's regret. By the time the judge called a recess, my hands were trembling. Mother touched my arm lightly. "We need to talk tonight, Chloe. There are things I never told you." I pulled away, the old anger rising hot and sharp. "Save it for the stand," I said, voice colder than I intended. Outside in the hallway I needed air. The Texas heat hit me like a wall, but it was nothing compared to the storm inside. I leaned against the marble column, trying to steady my breathing, when a familiar voice cut through the noise. "Chloe." Milani stepped closer, her eyes soft but guarded. I didn't know you'd be here. I didn't know you'd become this. She gestured at my suit, at the briefcase that screamed success. For a second the years melted away and we were 17 again. Scared and in love. But the courtroom loomed behind us, and the weight of everything unsaid pressed down hard. I had come back to defend my mother, yet standing in front of Milani I realized the real trial was just beginning. I stared at Milani for what felt like forever. The hallway buzzing with lawyers and clerks rushing past us like we were invisible. I didn't expect to see you either. I finally managed, my voice steadier than my heart. She looked the same yet different, stronger, with the quiet confidence that came from surviving on her own. I moved back to town 2 years ago, she said softly. Teaching at the high school now. When I heard about the lawsuit I thought I should be here. For closure maybe. Her words hung between us, heavy with everything we had lost. I wanted to ask 1,000 questions. Did she ever think about me? Did the scars still ache? Did she hate me for disappearing? But the bailiff called us back inside before I could find the courage. The afternoon session was brutal. Mr. Harlan's attorney laid out the financial discrepancies with surgical precision, painting my mother as a calculating woman who had hidden assets to avoid taxes and creditors. I objected where I could, cross-examined witnesses, but every argument felt hollow because part of me wondered if Victoria Bennett deserved the ruin coming for her. She sat beside me, silent and pale, occasionally glancing my way with an expression I couldn't read. Was it guilt? Regret? Or just fear of losing the empire she had built on the backs of everyone she had pushed away, including me? After court adjourned for the day, I drove to the old family house on the edge of town, the one I had sworn I would never set foot in again. The porch light was on, a small beacon in the gathering dusk. Mother opened the door before I could knock, her face lined with exhaustion. Come in, she said, stepping aside. The living room smelled the same, lemon polish and old Bibles, and the sight of my childhood photos still on the mantel hit me like a punch. I had been erased from most of them, but a few remained, frozen moments of a girl who no longer existed. We sat at the kitchen table with coffee neither of us touched. Why did you call me, Mom? I asked, cutting straight to it. There are 100 lawyers in Texas who could take this case. She looked down at her hands. Because you're the only one who knows the truth about me. About us. Her voice cracked. I was scared, Chloe. The church, the town, your father's family, they all said I had to choose. I chose wrong. I chose fear over you. The confession should have softened something inside me, but it only stirred the old rage. You didn't just choose fear, I shot back. You chose to throw your own daughter into the street. I was 17. I had nowhere to go. Milani's parents sent me away like I was contagious. She flinched but didn't look away. I thought if I was hard enough you'd come back changed. But you never did. And now here you are, stronger than I ever was. The words landed heavy, but I wasn't ready to forgive. Not yet. We talked for hours about the company books, about the shady deals my father had started before he died, about how she had covered for him out of loyalty and then got trapped. The lawsuit wasn't just about money. It was about legacy and the lies that had built it. By the time I left, the sky was black and my mind was spinning. Defending her meant digging into the very past that had destroyed me. It meant facing Milani again tomorrow. It meant risking the life I had built brick by painful brick. The next morning I arrived early, coffee in hand, trying to stay focused. Milani was already in the gallery, and this time she didn't look away. During a break she caught me in the hallway again. Can we talk after this? She asked. Not here. Somewhere real. I nodded before I could stop myself. That night we met at the old park where we used to hide, the same swings creaking in the breeze. She told me about the years after I left, how she had come out quietly to her family, how they had accepted her better than mine had, how she had finished college and come home to teach because she wanted to make sure no other kid felt as alone as we had. I looked for you, she said, for a long time, but you vanished. The pain in her voice mirrored my own. When she reached for my hand, I let her take it. The touch was electric, familiar, terrifying. For the first time in 8 years I felt seen again. But the courtroom waited, and so did the mother who had taught me that love could cost everything. The days blurred into a grind of depositions, document reviews, and sleepless nights in a cheap motel on the edge of town. Every morning I walked into that courtroom knowing the stakes were higher than money. Mr. Harlan's team had started digging into personal history, hinting they would call character witnesses to show my mother's pattern of harsh decisions. I knew exactly what that meant. They were circling the story of me, the daughter she had disowned. If they brought it out, the jury would see her not as a businesswoman but as a bigot who had abandoned her own child. And I would have to sit there and listen, pretending it didn't rip me open all over again. Milani and I stole moments whenever we could. We met at the park again, then at a quiet diner on the outskirts where no one knew us. She listened while I poured out the years of struggle, law school loans, lonely apartments, the nights I had almost called her but hung up at the last second. I was afraid you'd moved on, I admitted one evening, the neon sign buzzing above us. I thought if I disappeared, you could have a normal life. She smiled sadly. Normal was never what I wanted. I wanted you. The words hung between us, and when she leaned in and kissed me softly under the dim lights, it felt like coming home and starting over at the same time. But every kiss carried the shadow of the courtroom. Loving her again meant risking everything I had fought to build. Back at the house, Mother kept trying to bridge the gap. She cooked meals I barely touched, left old photo albums on the table like peace offerings. One night she broke down completely. I went to church every Sunday praying for you to come back straight and saved, she said, tears streaming. The pastor told me I was doing God's work by being firm. But every night I lay awake wondering if I had lost my soul instead of saving yours. Her confession should have healed something, but it only made the conflict sharper. How could I defend a woman who had used faith as a weapon against me? Yet walking away now would mean letting Mr. Harlan destroy her completely, and some twisted part of me still couldn't let that happen. The case escalated when the plaintiff subpoenaed old school records and social service reports from the year I left. They wanted to prove my mother's intolerance had extended beyond family to business decisions, firing employees for lifestyle issues, they claimed. I spent hours preparing objections, but I knew the truth. Some of those firings had happened, and Milani's name was quietly connected through rumors that had spread after I disappeared. During a heated pretrial hearing, the opposing counsel mentioned the Rivera girl in passing, and I saw Mother stiffen. Milani was no longer just my past. She was becoming evidence. That evening Milani met me at the motel, her face tight with worry. They called me in for a deposition tomorrow, she said. They want to know what happened the night your mom found us. I can refuse, but she trailed off. I held her close, feeling the weight of every choice we had ever made. If she testified, the whole town would hear our story. If she stayed silent, my mother might lose everything. And I was the one who had to decide how hard to fight. The moral line I had drawn for myself years ago, never let them use our love as a weapon, was blurring fast. That night we didn't talk much. We just held each other. Two women who had survived the same storm now caught in its eye again. The next morning the deposition room felt smaller than any courtroom. I sat beside Mother while Milani answered questions with quiet dignity. When they asked about the kiss, about the screams, about the night I was thrown out, her voice never wavered. Chloe was my first love, she said simply. And Victoria Bennett made sure she knew she wasn't welcome. The words landed like stones. Mother didn't look at me, but I saw her shoulders shake once. After it ended, I walked Milani to her car in silence. I'm sorry, I whispered. She touched my cheek. Don't be. We were never the ones who were wrong. But as I watched her drive away, I wondered how much more damage this case would do before it was over. The trial moved into full swing, and the tension inside me stretched tighter every day. Witnesses came and went. Accountants, former employees, old neighbors who remembered the troubled Bennett girl who had run away. Each story chipped away at my mother's image, and each one reminded me of the girl I used to be. I cross-examined them relentlessly, protecting Victoria Bennett with every legal tool I had. Yet every night I drove past the park where Milani and I had once planned a future and felt like a traitor to both of us. One afternoon the judge allowed a key piece of evidence. Financial records showing my mother had quietly sent money to my aunt for years after I left. Small checks, never enough to change my life, but proof she had never completely cut me off. When the documents were entered, Mother finally looked at me with something like hope. I couldn't say it out loud, she whispered during a recess. But I never stopped caring. I just didn't know how to fix what I broke. The admission cracked something inside me. For the first time I saw not the monster who had thrown me away, but a woman trapped by the same small-town prejudices that had nearly destroyed us both. Still, forgiveness wasn't a switch I could flip. The cost had been too high. Milani and I found stolen hours whenever court recessed. We drove to the lake outside town, sat on the hood of my car, and talked about everything except the trial. She told me about her students, about the quiet pride she felt when a shy kid came out to her. I told her about the big city cases I had won, the life I had built where no one knew my story. But the trial kept bleeding into our time together. "If I have to testify again in open court," she said one evening, "it will be public. Our names, our kiss, everything." I held her tighter. "Then we face it together. I won't let them turn our love into their weapon." The promise felt brave in the moment, but I knew the price. If the jury heard the full story, my mother's case could collapse under the weight of public sympathy or backlash. The turning point came during a brutal cross-examination of one of Mother's former partners. He claimed she had fired him after learning his son was gay, using the same language she had used on me. I objected fiercely, but the damage was done. The jury was listening, and their faces told me they were judging more than the books. That night Mother and I sat on the porch for the first time since I had returned. She spoke quietly. "I see now what I did to you. To Milani. To myself. If losing the company is the price for what I did, maybe I deserve it." Her honesty shook me more than any courtroom drama. For the first time I wondered if defending her to the end was still the right choice, or if the real victory was forcing her to face the truth. Milani called late that night. "I've been asked to take the stand again tomorrow," she said. "They want the full story from me." I drove to her apartment without thinking, and when she opened the door we didn't speak. We simply fell into each other. Years of longing and pain pouring out in quiet touches and whispered promises. It wasn't about passion. It was about choosing each other again in the middle of the storm. But as I left before dawn, I knew the next day in court would test every decision I had made. The courtroom was packed when Milani took the stand. Cameras flashed outside, and the air felt electric with anticipation. I had prepared her as best I could, but nothing could shield her from the opposing counsel's questions. He walked her through that night step by step. The kiss, the screams, my mother's exact words, the rain, the suitcase on the porch. Milani answered with calm dignity, never raising her voice, never flinching. "Chloe didn't choose to be thrown away," she said at one point. "She chose to survive." And she did. When he tried to twist her words into proof of my mother's character, I objected so sharply the judge sustained it instantly. But the jury had heard everything. The damage was real. During the lunch break I found Mother in the hallway, tears streaming down her face for the first time in public. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, "for what I did to both of you. If I lose today, I understand." Something in me shifted. The anger that had fueled me for 8 years suddenly felt heavy instead of sharp. I hugged her, awkward, brief but real. "We're not done fighting," I told her. In that moment I realized I wasn't just defending a client. I was defending the possibility that people could change, even if the change came too late. When court resumed, I called my mother to the stand. The room went silent. I asked her the questions I had rehearsed, but I also asked the ones that mattered. "Did you disown your daughter because of who she loved?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Yes. And it was the worst mistake of my life." The confession wasn't strategy, it was truth. The jury watched her break. Watched her admit the prejudice that had cost her everything. When I finished, the opposing side tried to tear her apart, but the damage to their narrative was done. A mother who could admit her failure in open court was harder to hate than one who hid behind lies. That evening Milani and I walked the park again. "You were incredible today," she said. "Both of you." We sat on the same swing where we had once dreamed of running away together. "Whatever happens tomorrow," I told her, "I'm not leaving this time. Not without you." She smiled, the first real smile I had seen in weeks. "Good. Because I'm not letting you disappear again." We kissed under the streetlights, slow and certain. And for the first time the future felt possible instead of haunted. The closing arguments the next day were the hardest I had ever given. I stood in front of the jury and laid out the financial facts, but I also spoke about second chances, about the cost of prejudice, about how one family's pain had rippled through an entire community. I didn't beg. I didn't manipulate. I simply told the truth as I now understood it. When I sat down, Mother squeezed my hand under the table. "Whatever the verdict," she whispered, "thank you for giving me the chance to be better." The jury deliberated for 2 days. Milani and I waited together at the house, helping Mother cook meals that no one really ate. We talked about everything: her students, my cases in the city, the life we might build if the verdict went our way. Mother watched us with quiet eyes, no longer trying to preach or fix. She simply listened. On the second afternoon the call came. The jury had reached a decision. We returned to the courtroom together, Mother, Milani, and me. The foreman stood and read the verdict. Not guilty on the major fraud charges. A partial victory, enough to save the company but with heavy fines that would force changes. Mother closed her eyes in relief. Outside, reporters shouted questions, but we slipped out the back. In the parking lot she turned to me. "I can never repay what you gave me, Chloe. Not just the case. Yourself." I nodded, the old wound still there but no longer bleeding. "We both paid a price," I said. "Now we decide what we do with it." That night the three of us sat on the porch, Mother, Milani, and me, watching the stars come out over Texas. Milani's hand found mine in the dark, and for the first time in 8 years the future felt wide open. Mother spoke softly. "I used to think love had to look a certain way. I was wrong. Thank you for showing me what real love looks like." The words weren't perfect, and they didn't erase the years, but they were a beginning. Weeks later I packed up my city apartment and moved back. Not to the old house, but to a small place near the school where Milani taught. Mother sold part of the company and started a scholarship fund for kids who felt different. The town still whispered, but the whispers mattered less every day. Milani and I walked openly now, hands linked, building something stronger than the fear that had once torn us apart. The cost had been high: years of pain, lost time, broken trust, but we had paid it, and we had chosen each other anyway. In the end, standing in the same courtroom where it all began, I realized the real verdict wasn't the one the jury gave. It was the one I gave myself. The right to love without apology, and the courage to forgive without forgetting. Was Chloe right to defend the mother who had disowned her for loving another woman, or was it ultimately a betrayal of everything she had fought to become?